It's a beautiful world out there beyond the door. All you have to do is take a moment and look. The world, when left in peace, gives us a place where children play and people live and we make music. But beneath that quiet beauty, something's afoot. I've returned to the scenic village of Tatamagouche to investigate a rumor so bizarre it's almost unbelievable. Tatamagouche's good water comes from the French River watershed, renowned for its purity. The village, and this pristine, serene landscape, is entirely dependent on it. The rumors are that there's exploration to put a gold mine right at the top of that watershed. I find it unbelievable anybody would even consider that. Gold mining is one of the most polluting types of mining, and the consequences are the longest lasting. Waters polluted by gold mines will be ruined for potentially thousands of years. I'd like to say I find it impossible that anyone would even consider this absurdity, but the realities of greed and the horrors of history say otherwise. In this dramatic landscape, we go from mountaintop to seaside in a moment. Along the way, and ensconced in the woods, are ancient homes, remnants of an era long gone by. And along the scenic coast, we find the working vessels of those who make their living by the sea. And just outside the villages are the cottages of those who live here and those who vacation here. But at last, the circuitous and beautiful journey brings me to my destination, a little community center at the library at the edge of Tatamagouche. Here I'll meet with several members of the Sustainable Northern Nova Scotia group. SUNNS, or SUNS, has confirmed that the rumors are indeed true. The provincial government has been courting gold mining companies to come to this and other areas of the province. SUNS is concerned, and rightly so. When it comes to good water, gold mining is a brutal industry. A small mine in this watershed alone would use some 1.5 million liters of water per day. That's over 1,000 liters of water per minute. And gone are the days when intrepid men went below ground with picks to hack out ore. Modern gold mines don't look for nuggets. Modern gold mines pulverize earth and stone into dust and use hazardous chemicals such as mercury and cyanide to bind with the gold and separate it from the dust. More water, and more water still, churn the mass, separating the gold dust from the unwanted minerals until only the desired gold is left behind. These toxic chemicals inevitably leach back into the ground and to water supplies. Though the harm gold mines do doesn't stop there. The broken soil reveals acids that were once contained safely underground, and when it rains, these acids are washed into rivers, and watercourses that flow through gold mining country yield acid water. SUNS is naturally concerned, and given it's been proposed gold mine be built in the heart of a watershed that supplies thriving historic villages with vibrant tourist industries, busy farms, and prosperous vineyards, the members of Sustainable Northern Nova Scotia ask the all-important question, is it worth putting all this at risk for the brief benefits of a boom, then inevitable bust type of industry?
This is advanced exploration, and we have the definition of what it means. Cutting roads, clear cutting, trenching, drilling, test pitting. It's not, so if you need clarity, when they say exploration, it's nothing small.
The exploration is going on here, deep in the French River watershed. This is a nearly pristine woodland, and more than 30 villages are dependent on its good water. These villages are centuries old. They have prosperous, sustainable economies that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars per year. Given all that, what kind of forces could motivate a government to bring in a boom or bust, high-risk industry such as gold mining and plant it at the top of a sensitive, very important watershed?
I'm Catherine Anderson, and I'm a member of SUNS, Sustainable Northern Nova Scotia, and I'm a member because since 2004, I've been in solidarity with groups in Guatemala resisting Canadian gold mining companies.
In solidarity, resisting Canadian gold mines operating in Guatemala. That is an incredible statement. And yet, when I looked into it, I discovered an almost unknown human rights horror has been going on in Guatemala for decades. North American, primarily Canadian mining companies have manipulated Guatemalans into accepting the extraction of mineral wealth from their lands at the cost of the destruction of their lands and soil, and often at the cost of human lives.
My experiences began in 2004 when a man from an environmental organization arrived late at a meeting with a group of Maritimers who were in Guatemala to learn about human rights and social justice. And he arrived rather disheveled and tired, and he said he'd taken the bus all night because he had come to tell Canadians that we were the source of destruction in Guatemala right now, and in the Western Highlands, and most particularly in the Department of San Marcos. From that moment on, we became involved with the communities resisting the gold core mine in San Marcos. And since then, right up to today, we have documented all of the devastating impacts of the mine on water, air, health, the social impact on the community, which has been absolutely tremendous. We're very aware of gold core's impact also in Honduras. And then we've been very involved with the Hud Bay case, which involved murder and paralysis. And we've also been involved in the Tahoe case, which is silver mining, where 9 protesters were shot for their peaceful protests. So the moment that I saw in our newspaper in November that gold mining was coming here, I thought, we have come full circle. The same companies will be wanting to do gold mining in Tatamagouche with the same impacts.
Canada and the United States generally like to think of themselves as the good guys of the world. And it is hard for us to imagine that companies lodged within our own borders could be at the heart of such detrimental human rights abuses. And I think that we find it much harder to imagine that those companies might bring those abuses back home to us. But the way that gold mining companies are approaching Eastern Canada proves that there are no exceptions to the rules by which they're willing to operate. This article describes the gold mines moving aggressively into the area, and aggressive is a good term. The gold mining operations have proven that they are quite willing to virtually steal, whatever land they want to meet their financial objectives. And as they do this, the government is essentially enabling them and helping them along. Oddly, one of the gold mining companies moving into Eastern Canada is actually Vancouver-based, yet calls itself Atlantic Gold. It operates one gold mine currently in Nova Scotia and is aggressively aiming to develop several others. During the time of NDP Premier Darrell Dexter, Atlantic Gold decided to open the Touquoy gold mine near Moose River, Nova Scotia. To do this, it needed to appropriate land that had been owned by the Higgins family for over 120 years. Nova Scotia had revised its laws to make it, quote, friendly, unquote, for mining companies to move into the area, which made it possible for mining companies to bypass both thorough environmental assessments before mines were built, for them to bypass proper and thorough monitoring, and for them even to appropriate land long held by private citizens. The Higgins land was forcefully acquired by the Atlantic Gold Company, and a pittance of its worth was offered for it. The gold under their own feet essentially stolen from the family that had owned the land for generations. The entire deed essentially invited and enabled by our own government. The family took them to court, demanding fair pay. And when the courts ruled that Atlantic Gold should pay them about $350,000 for their property, Atlantic Gold appealed. Apparently, despite there being hundreds of millions of dollars of gold beneath that property, $350,000 was too much to pay the family for their own land. The Higgins family themselves had never had any interest in the particles of gold beneath their land. They operated a Christmas tree farm, and they recognized that the land's intrinsic worth was in its value to be productive for generations to come, not destroyed for a few years' worth of high-margin profits. But sons, and all the people that live below the French River watershed are concerned, and rightfully so. Gold mines have shown themselves to be brutal elsewhere in the world, and aggressive and not above seizing land here even in North America. The fact is, if you live in that watershed, your good water is in danger. And why? These gold mines have a life expectancy of 5 to 10 years, and they have a terrible history of cleaning up after themselves afterward. In fact, as we shall see, it's usually the taxpayer that foots the bill. Despite all that, the history is that even the government of these people, the very government that is elected and sworn to protect them, has shown that it will invariably defend and support the interest of these gold corporations, support them even above maintaining sustainable, profitable communities, support them despite the millennia of damage the mining operations are likely to cause to both land and water. Why? That's something we've yet to answer, but we will.
For the Department of Energy and Mines, their success story is that they bring in mines.
You know, for us, we want to see a viable long-term sectors grow here so that our kids can stay here and not boom and bust industries. I mean, yeah, you're taking a global perpetual industry and, you know, putting it at risk, I guess.
So the worst case scenario is either creeping pollution in the water or massive, catastrophic, sudden failure and pollution that just rushes from the hill.
And we know that these accidents happen. It's only a few years ago that Mount Polly happened, that where the dam burst. And they said it would never happen, and they promised it. And the First Nations communities in that area have been absolutely devastated.
I heard a funny rumor while traveling the backwaters of the French River watershed. According to these rumors, after government and mining industry spokesmen spoke to the people of the French River watershed, they were invited to a community meeting to discuss their feelings on the development of a gold mine in the area, in a dark, rural, out-of-the-way location far down a dirt road, a place many persons might not be aware of, and a place many other persons might not be able to get to on a night of the week when they have to deal with children and look forward to work the next day. Retired social worker Paul Jenkinson confirmed this rumor was true and took me out there to see this location for myself. What I found was a backwater community building used by outdoor recreational groups. It seems odd, if indeed the government and mining industry spokespersons were interested in transparency, that they would choose such a location when there were far more accessible and modern locations available in Tatamagouche and the other villages where many more persons from those communities could have participated. But the historical precedent is that government will give the mining industry leave to do whatever it wants, whenever it wants, and it will enable the mining industry to do so. Government has even shown that when it comes down to it, it's willing to sacrifice an entire village and a provincial park in order to let the mining industry have its way. To that end, environmental assessments have been incomplete and rushed. And despite the grave concerns of many citizens groups, and environmental organizations and scientists, gold mining operations are given permission to go ahead anyway. But the simple reality is the mining industry, in alliance with the government, were going to stop at nothing in order to install the Torquoy gold mine at Moose River, Nova Scotia. The only reasonable conclusion one can draw is that when it comes to mining, government is either ignorant or complicit. It's certainly not regulating nor protecting. If you have doubts, let's look a little further into this mess.
Yeah, until some of these industry insiders are gone from our government agencies and departments, or at least they're gone from those strategic positions. They're the ones who make the decisions, not the really well-meaning, hard-working men and women who are sitting in Nova Scotia Environment or in the former DNR, who really go into that because they care about the environment and our forests and the wildlife. But it's those guys who came from industry, and that's really puts Nova Scotia in a case of regulatory capture. And until they're gone and they've overturned the Department of Lands and Forestry and got rid of some of those big players, I don't think things will change. It will continue business as usual no matter how many reviews they do.
Joanne Baxter, investigative reporter and author of The Mill, believes that not only Nova Scotia but much of eastern Canada has become subject to a phenomenon called regulatory capture. I would add that this phenomenon extends well beyond Canada and into much of the United States as well. In a nutshell, regulatory capture is a phenomenon in which big industry places persons into positions of authority in government, where they have influence over the creation of regulations and enforcement. In this way, they can ensure that regulation and enforcement favor big industry above the general populace. I've often described myself as a pessimist who would like to be proven wrong, and yet, here I find myself walking over a bridge over this beautiful stream. It flows out of the French River watershed, and to my left is a sign that marks this stream as protected fish habitat. And despite the recognition of the integral value of this habitat and its essential role in the environment, a mining corporation is pushing to establish a mine at the top of this watershed, and our government is strongly considering allowing it. If a large industrial organization can establish an operation that has a life expectancy of a mere 5 to 10 years, and then depart, leaving the local taxpayers to pay the bill for the cleanup, which is the typical modus operandi of mines, along with environmental impacts that may last for thousands of years, one can hardly trust that government is truly acting with the best interest of its constituency in mind, and free from the influence of regulatory capture. If it is true, if government has been captured and become unduly influenced by industry, what can help? Some people believe it is educating youth who will guide the future.
Education is important, and I think the tide may be changing with all the incredible weather changes in the world, the flooding and tornadoes, and I think people are starting to wake up and seeing that if we're going to, this world is going to survive, that we have to make changes in the way we do our businesses. So.
Madeline Conacher of Northern Nova Scotia recognizes that education, especially in light of undeniable environmental changes going on all around the planet at this time, is the solution to promoting a better future. It will teach our young people that the dollar is not the most important objective in this life, but that taking care of this irreplaceable world that sustains us is. But the folk of Northern Nova Scotia are not the only ones who have reached this conclusion. The mining industry has also reached it, and they have begun a campaign to disseminate disinformation within the school system. It is disinformation because it promotes mining as so greatly revised that it no longer presents any real risk to the environment. To this end, the Mining Association of Nova Scotia has launched numerous educational programs within the province's schools, such as the program Mining Rocks, wherein they challenge students to create videos on the subject. And government, through both Liberal and Conservative MLAs, has been working hand in hand with the Mining Association of Nova Scotia to hand out awards to those students and take part in their ceremonies. But Madeline is most certainly right. People are becoming increasingly aware of the hidden environmental cost of the mining industry and the long-term effects of those environmental impacts. Those effects will impact their property values, the health of themselves and their families, and potentially the overall viability of the communities where they live. So it seems ominous that the Mining Association of Nova Scotia would undertake a program directly designed to influence the minds of young students. Some might even think of this as a form of indoctrination. But if you're going to get people to buy into the illusion that such a horrendously polluting and hazardous industry is a good thing for the economy or local communities, you'd have to start them young. But the gold mining industry long since learned to play to the public imagery game. Atlantic Gold recently featured on its website an image of one of its gold bricks, designed to entice investors. One standard gold brick weighs 12.4 kilos, or about 27.5 pounds. But if you think it was impressive the Touquoy gold mine was able to make this much gold, it'll really blow your mind how much pollution they had to make to produce that. Some 24,000 tons of toxic mine tailings were produced to make this one gold brick. By way of comparison, that is 106.7 Statues of Liberty worth of toxic waste to produce a single brick of gold. Toxic waste that is going to be stored in the heart of Eastern Canada's lake country. Joanne Baxter believes that corporate capture is the only way to make sense of government's lack of motivation to regulate the gold mining sector.
I find it incredible that in Nova Scotia, we the taxpayers actually help to fund the industry lobby group, Forest Nova Scotia. Last year, I forget the amount of money, but it was over $100,000 that we contributed towards Forest Nova Scotia, which is an industrial forestry lobby group. They work on behalf of basically the pulp mills and the big mills in this province. And it's the same thing with the Mining Association of Nova Scotia, which is a lobby group. But we as citizens, we don't have anybody paying for our lobby group.
It's an Orwellian concept, isn't it? Taxpayer monies are actually used to fund lobbying groups for gold mining and also the forestry sector, and as we shall see in the next episode, other sectors that are detrimental to maintaining good water. Joanne Baxter believes there is no way to compel government to act in the best interest of its citizens until the agents of corporate capture are removed from big government. Yet this will be incredibly hard, for she notes that as things currently stand, not only is our government heavily subjected to corporate capture, but it's reached the point where even taxpayer monies are funded toward that capture process. One could argue a solid case that big industry has been moving strategically to push its agenda, and whereas government's first interest should be the protection of its own citizenship and constituencies, government has acted with a clear conflict of interest. But it's time to move on. Let's see firsthand the kind of place they chose to put a gold mine, and what happens to its lands. Back in the time made simple by the loss of detail, there is a town that is no more a town. The road there may seem as if it should have been a quarry, and there is a story in a book about it. Robert Frost, Directive. In Robert Frost's tragic poem, perhaps an Orwellian vision of things that were even then taking shape, and now have come to pass, he wrote of the sad plight of a little New England town that once thrived in a glorious land of forests and farms, now lost to quarries and mines and paved over, and ultimately to the service of a species that confuses greed for progress. That poem is chiseled into a monument that stands outside of the Moose River gold mine, in a little out-of-the-way corner about 40 meters from the visitor center. It faces away from the road even, so a passerby might think it were a mere tombstone. There is no path that goes to it, at least not one that's readily visible, and to get to it you have to jump across a ditch and walk across untended grass, almost as if it were meant to be forgotten, very much like the little village of Moose River, and all its history, and all its woodlands, its little lakes and beaver dams, places where deer played and children laughed, now gone, a memory literally up in dust and blowing away, as all around me heavy machinery hums and thrums, digging away the earth in pursuit of gold, an ounce here and an ounce there, all the while producing a veritable mountain of toxic tailings, to be dumped out of sight, unseen and forgotten. Not so unlike that lost little town. But the real memorial, when you get right down to it, is not this lonely standing stone here in the green grass, with the wind blowing around it, and the dust pouring off the gold pit just 100 meters beyond. The real memorial is literally engraved in the land. So much has been lost here, for this isn't just about a gold mine, nor is it about the lakes that surround this gold mine, nor the streams, nor even these wetlands, but the incursion of the acceptance of a way of life that values the dollar over everything else, that values the dollar over places where families lived and died, where their children romped and played and dreamed, that values the dollar over pure black earth that is able to grow our crops year after year, generation after generation. And it's about the rise of a way of looking at life in the world that is all about what can I get right now, in this instant for me, that takes little consideration for how our deeds right now will impact the future. As my little drone, Eco3, rises above this memorial to spin around, I am struck by the vastness of the true memorial. For this mine covers thousands of acres, and many more mines like it are planned. And the very nature of gold mining as it exists nowadays virtually requires it to be established in places where water will flow, and where strip mining will be the norm, the modus operandi, where earth by the millions of tons will be stripped away for the minutiae of gold dust held within it. And then ultimately that earth, rendered into toxic tailings, will be squirreled away, gone, with hopes of being forgotten. But it will be there to haunt us, as well as the scar that is the land. And as has been the case with so many other mines, the damage done, it will be the thing that brings what was done back into the minds of those who exist in that present yet to come, over and over. A kind of post-traumatic stress disorder inflicted by our greed upon our children for generations and generations to come. It is a mystery that it is even tolerated that this mine should be here, when only kilometers away there are rich farms and rolling hills and a land so beautiful it makes the soul want to weep. Or perhaps weep because none of it is sacred. At any moment a mining company could show interest in that land, and the employees of that mine have every right to walk over that land and survey it and dig on it and drill it and test it, and the owners of that land can do absolutely nothing about it according to current laws. That at any moment, fertile farmlands that give us food, verdant pastures that feed our livestock, rolling hills that provide us with beautiful forests, resplendent with magical color, that can provide us with timber year after year, all of these can be stripped away, and the land so tarnished, they are veritably gone forever. For our government, in the interest of quick profits, will allow these companies, regardless of the harm that they do, to step in anywhere they want, take the land, pay the owners but a pittance, strip the resources and depart, and leave the people who live in that region with the expense of the cleanup. If one has any doubt the direction things are going in this regard, one only need take a look at the memorial that is the now lost village of Moose River. Filming in the Moose River gold mine was a sobering experience. You have to actually stand there to get a sense of the true vastness of this operation. It expands over square miles, thousands and thousands of acres. And what is really stunning is when you stand there, you realize there are streams and ponds and lakes everywhere. The mine literally surrounds these places. And given the known risk of gold mining to good water, it is beyond belief that a gold mine would be given leave to ever operate in a place like this. In fact, according to satellite maps, the mine comes to within 20 meters of the tip of Scraggy Lake, one of the major bodies of water in the area. I spent about 90 minutes filming around the visitors section, walking over to the memorial for the Lost United Church about 40 meters up the road and filming that, and even sending a drone up to do a little video capture of what was going on all around. And while I could hear the heavy machinery operating in the distance, it wasn't until I sent the drone up that I was able to really get a sense of how expansive the operation was. And several times a security vehicle passed, the driver occasionally waving. It was a Sunday and I was the only person there, and they seemed to take no note of me whatsoever. But after I had filmed at the memorial, I got into my truck and started up a public through road. I noticed as I went about a mile up the road a place where I could see the tip of the lake through an opening in the trees. The water looked off. It looked sickly, and I stopped there to photograph it. I had barely gotten out of my truck. I wasn't even there 60 seconds when the security vehicle came speeding up to me and stopped right beside me. And the woman, a dark-haired woman who looked to be of medium height, though I can't be sure because I couldn't see fully and clearly inside the truck, said I was not allowed to take pictures here because a special permit was required. In truth, I'm not even sure if her actions were legal, because it's a public through road that goes to villages beyond. But the Atlantic Gold Mine certainly didn't want anybody taking pictures up close of the quality of the water near their gold mine. I had hoped to go down there and get close-up shots and underwater imagery of the water, but it was clear nobody was going to be allowed into there. It amazes me that in the country of Canada, ostensibly a free country, our government allows these companies to act as autocratic entities and police themselves, and to deny public access to avoid citizen monitoring. It would seem that Canada, the Nova Scotia government in particular, has created a climate that is in fact friendly to the interest of these big mines, and quite the opposite to the interest of the private citizen, and a healthy maintenance of transparency, which is the foundation upon which any trust must be built. Gold mines, as a rule, are short-term boom-or-bust industries. They tend to bring in a brief period of moderate wealth and create a short series of boom-or-bust jobs. And then, almost as suddenly, they are gone. In fact, Atlantic Gold seems to have a life expectancy for the various mines that it wants to establish here on the northeast side of North America of 5 to 10 years per mine. And while each of those mines might input several $100 million into the economy for a few brief years, it is imperative to ask if the long-term consequences of those mines would be greater than what is gained. The evidence at hand clearly says yes. If we look at a different kind of mining, the oil extraction done from the open pit tar sands in Alberta, and we consider the vast lakes of tailings that have been created there, The cost of cleanup is presently estimated at over $44 billion. That is a sum that is greater than the entirety of the royalties that have been paid to the province throughout the existence of the tar sands. In British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec, and the Northwest Territories, the sum total of the cost of cleaning up their mining sites is estimated to be over $9 billion. The cost of cleaning up these sites is so vast that the exact number is not actually known. These are rough estimates based on what data is available. What is known is that mining companies come in and offer local persons and governments shining prospects for vast profits. They tell them lovely stories about how they will contain the waste and it will all be very safe. Despite that, history and the media are replete with stories of impoundment breaches, of the leaching of acid mine water, of the breaching of tailing ponds. But the song and dance of quick and easy wealth goes on, and commonly wins over those who refuse to consider the evidence. Or maybe it's not that people refuse to consider the evidence. I think the members of the Sustainable Northern Nova Scotia group were right. People are more educated. People are taking note. People are noticing the decline in their air and their good water. And they want something done. Perhaps the real culprit here is corporate capture. For decades, big industry has worked to insert its people into government, either in bureaucratic roles or consulting and heading up organizations that work to determine environmental regulation, or in politics itself. Perhaps, as Joanne Baxter said, these entities need to be deconstructed and the agents of corporate capture removed, so that once again these government entities can go back to performing their proper role, which is seeing to the health and welfare of their citizens and constituents. But it'll be an uphill fight to make that happen. It's a fight worth making. It starts now with taking a stand to defend our good water and preventing it from becoming gold water.